Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So today we're back with another themed episode of the podcast, and as you've seen by the title, it is the theme of voices or characters who interact with miscellaneous voices. So I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain what four films we're going to be talking about today, because it's a good slate of films. It's a very good one. So off to you, mate.
It is probably the best slate of films that we've talked about since Unconventional Romances, which is an episode that you can check out within the Movie Mates podcast playlist
Of
on the
course,
channel. Go ahead and check that out because I
one
think
of our
that's one of the
best,
episodes that we're that
one of
we're
my
proudest
favorites.
of.
Yeah, for sure.
This episode, as Matthew said, we're talking about characters who see and hear things that aren't there. I made a bit of a weird shout with the first one because after actually having seen it, which I think is both of our first times, it doesn't really fit the theme. But I'm sure we'll get into it. The first film that we'll be talking about is Taxi Driver.
Mhm.
The second is Fight Club. The third is Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. And the fourth is The Voices.
Yeah, there's some absolutely fantastic films here, and Calvinized
You're
friendship.
like, Matthew's like, three good films.
Calvinized friendship nearly came to an explosive end before this podcast when I revealed that one of his favorite films I actually don't like. So it's gonna be a Winnie the Pooh situation, I think. But yeah,
Yeah, you should be glad that there's a few dozen miles between us
yeah,
right
yeah,
now, Matthew.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Luckily, we're just at a computer screen. But yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, because this is a themed episode, you can check out our theme playlist where, as Callum said, we've got unconventional romances, romantic comedies, crime, American classics, loads more. So check that out as well. And yeah, thanks to everyone who supported us recently. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on any of the four films down below if you've seen them. We'd love to hear them. And of course, time codes for each individual movie and our email, moviematespodcast@gmail.com, is in the description below as well. So I suppose the first one is Taxi Driver, which, if I've done my research correctly, would be a 1976 release, I think.
Yes, I believe so. And as I mentioned before, not sure that it fits the theme. It could have more comfortably, fit under a few other banners. Like Insomnia or Obsession. But in all honesty, I was just eager to watch this film. And
It's very, very good.
it really depends, on how you read the, you talking to me scene. Because whether you see it as him having a breakdown, or him just him having a breakdown and seeing things, or if you just see it as him playing out the scenario of the assassination of Palantine, you
Mhm.
know depending on how you view that and how you view the ending, then it does potentially fit into the theme, depending on your interpretation. But
Yeah.
it was difficult, going into me sort of picking the ones for this theme, because I was by design, intentionally avoiding information about the film because I didn't want it ruined.
Yeah, and of course we've reviewed a couple of Scorsese films before, and this one, obviously similar to King of Comedy, stars De Niro, and sort of this sort of obsession, sort of a guy who's quite clearly sort of obsessed. He's got sort of, I think he deals with mental illness. He's a very lonely man, and I think De Niro is just absolutely incredible here. I think this might be his best performance that I've certainly seen. My original favorite one was the King of Comedy, but I think this one is it's a lot better. I think he's remarkable.
Yeah, if you want to make a good Robert De Niro film, he's either, like a charming criminal, or he's, an obsessive, person with mental health issues.
Yeah.
That those are the two things that he does well. And here, yeah, he's peak Robert De Niro in the best possible way. His performance is amazing.
Yeah, he's absolutely incredible. And I think one thing that strikes me about this film is that it's just so 1970s. Like the score is absolutely remarkable, but also it feels so ahead of its time as well in a weird sense. Like it feels like a film made today. Like it feels very much like Joker, which I know is sort of
Ugh.
Scorsese had an influence over, but this is far much better than Joker in my opinion. Like I think this film is it's just such a very smart film, and I've rambled on about this every podcast episode. It's for the most part normal people doing normal stuff, and I like that. So it's only good things from me, my friend.
I mean, I think we should briefly mention Joker, because this is there's a very easy comparison to be made.
Yeah.
As you said, in the early stages of Joker, Martin Scorsese was involved, but then but by the end of the final product, he actually went uncredited. He said he sort of put a few years into it, but that for him, he just couldn't reconcile sort of the comic book side of it. But that didn't stop them from robbing him of his ideas, because, well, I mean, I don't know if they're his ideas necessarily. Of course, in my opinion, film is sort of a screenwriter's medium. But when it comes to, I think he does have I think he writes most of his films, to
Yeah,
my knowledge.
yeah, I
But
think so. Yeah, I
I,
think
I,
so.
I
I
don't
know
know
what
if
you
I'm
mean. No,
completely bottling
I know
that,
what
but
you mean. No, I definitely
yeah,
know what you mean.
from memory, they have robbed him blind. Joker is a combination of the king of comedy, as you mentioned, and Taxi Driver, but worse than both. I think it's very easy to copy ideas and reskin them with a new concept. But which film do you think it is more like?
I think I actually think it's a lot more like Joker, in the sense that it's this sort of character who feels like he's been rejected by society. He hates how sort of grimy the city is. It's so conflicted. It's just so tarnished. And I think for me, it really feels like that. Obviously, I think they're very different characters, in the sense that Arthur Fleck and Joker is a bit more sort of, how would I say, is a sort of a bit more, um sort of a bit more of an isolated character, whereas here I think Travis he's a bit more sort of, bit more social. You know what I mean? Like he has taxi friends. He's got, he's clearly, well, taxi friends. He's sort of, I can't really describe it. He's more of a, at the same time, he's more sort of around people, but he almost feels a bit more lonely, in the sense that
Mm.
he feels like he just has to. Obviously, he's got insomnia, so he just has to drive all night for taxis. I think he says like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the mornings, which is crazy. But I mean, yeah, I think they're very, very similar, both of them. But I think the Joker parallel for me is where it stands a bit more true. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I think the narrative of Joker is, it's like, to me, it came across like it's the character of Travis Bickle put into the story of the King of Comedy, because it's this sort
Yes,
of
yeah,
sympathetic character who wants to make a political message, and then you put him into the story. I think that is the Joker character. But then the narrative around Joker is the obsessiveness towards Murray Franklin, which is what we see with whatever his character's name was in the King of Comedy. We did
oh,
actually
Rupert
watch it though.
Pupkin, Rupert Pupkin.
Rupert Pupkin, of course. I should have known. Apologies. But at least we've seen it, because a lot of people make comparisons. Saying you get like
Yeah.
the incels on the internet, saying
The
like
incels.
Joker is the best film ever made, and it takes a big steaming dump on the work of Martin Scorsese. Who haven't seen it, but
Yeah,
I
I know
mean,
what you mean.
there's nothing high and mighty about which films you watch. You like the films that you like.
Of
Don't
course.
don't. I think we would never criticize a film that we haven't seen.
Yeah, well, I do. Well, if you're a subscriber to me, Michelle, you've known that I especially from my perspective, I've definitely sort of phoned
At
in a
least you
few
gave Blade
reviews.
Runner 2049 a good review.
Yeah. Oh, good times, good times. One thing about this film, De Niro got jacked. De Niro is he's a,
Well,
he's a he's a
he's
lean,
ripped, but
mean.
is he jacked?
He's lean. But he's got what a
Yeah.
haircut as well. What a haircut he gives.
Mm.
What's he doing? What is he doing?
Because like the muscles are popping, but as you say, lean.
Lean. Yeah.
What's the difference? Like I feel like ripped implies meat,
Yeah, I think
implies mass to me.
ripped implied steroids, whereas I don't think De Niro probably, he doesn't look just up to me here. He just looks like sort of lean, mean, sort of UFC Conor McGregor physique. You know what I mean? He's quite athletic.
Shredded, I
Shredded,
think is the
shredded's a
most
good, very good
appropriate.
adjective. Yes, very, very good. And I think one thing about this film, one thing I think potentially people could criticize is the pacing of it. But I actually didn't find the pacing that harmful to my viewing of it. I thought the pacing was really well done. And one thing about the Travis character, like, do you feel sympathy for him? Because part of me does, but then part of me thinks there's something about him. There's like this deep rage inside where I was like, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, in his mind, of course, we have to consider that there's clear mental illness here.
Yes.
He has reconciled the fact that he wants to be a hero. He wants to be considered the this warrior, this savior, and he's willing to do that at any cost. And I think that's very apparent in how he handles the situation. With Iris, the child prostitute.
Yeah.
Because I think that he saves her in a manner that is worthy of admiration. You know, it's a violent end, you know, but I don't, you know, disagree with the morals of that. You know, he, you know, the only people that he ends up actually harming within the film are, you know, dangerous criminals who have, you know, facilitated, you know, child prostitution. So I mean, you know, I feel no sympathy for those characters. But you
Definitely.
know, that there was a review that I read that, you know, referenced the irony between, you know, him trying to kill Palantine, and then him, you know, being sort of you know, praised for killing the, you know, his attempted assassination versus his successful killings. You know, so
It's a fine line
you
there,
know,
isn't there?
he's
As
yeah, you
well.
know, he's sort of virtuous for killing the people that he does kill. But had he actually been successful in killing the person he planned
Yeah.
to initially, then he would have been, you know, received very differently. So
Yeah.
to me, for the ones that he succeeded in killing, you know, for his actions, I am sympathetic towards him. But you know, with his intentions, he actually wanted to kill sort of an innocent politician. So
Yeah.
for that, you know, getting inside his mind, I'm not sympathetic to his intentions.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really great way of articulating that, man, to be honest with you. And I think what's really smart about his character is that you can clearly see he's a bit more mentally unstable as the film progresses. Towards the end, you know, he just shaves off his hair and sort of a mohawk, and sort of obviously the famous, I think that's the most famous scene in this movie or of any Scorsese movie, is like, "You talking to me?" You know, that scene. It's absolutely incredible. That was my De Niro impression there for years. I know, you're welcome.
Nailed
Uh,
it.
yeah, I know. But yeah, he's like, I think one thing that actually really brought a smile to my face this film was like when he sort of does like a Tony Stark montage where like he builds this sort of gun thing that like if he goes like that, like a gun slides into his hand. Did you see that? That was so weird.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic because like
Sure.
that goes on for, you know, a minute or two, and I was like, what the fuck is that? But
Yeah.
then, you know, he whips it out, and then he still doesn't use that, you know, whenever he goes to, you know, attempt to assassinate Palatine. I'm like, you know, the whole reason you were rumbled, you know, was the part where you reached into your jacket. So I mean, if you just had that
Yeah,
locked and loaded,
exactly.
you'd have nailed it.
Definitely for sure.
You know, something that you'd mentioned previously, and you know, it's immediate that it kicks in, you know, even for dialogue or performances, and that's the score. And you know, it's this sort of, you know, grand jazz score, and it's beautiful. But to me, I'm not sure that it matched, you know, this sort of grounded mental health tale. You know, it feels like something, you know, that would pair more, you know, with Blade Runner. But you know, quite honestly, Blade Runner seems a bit like, you know, just a sci-fi skin taxi driver. Like,
Yeah,
did you get
yeah.
that vibe at all?
Yeah, it does. I think it's kind of similar how I would sort of view the American Beauty score. Like the American Beauty score doesn't fit in with the tone of the film, but I think that's why it works for me. Kind of how this one, like, there's clearly some sort of weird sort of, they don't mesh together well. I think that's part of the Travis character. You know, there's such a
Yeah,
fine line between how he's appreciated for being a vigilante to when, like, if he actually was successful, he would have murdered an innocent politician running for president. So I think it's so interesting. It's clearly like, I think the most indicative scene for me of the character is the final shot of the film where like he looks at the rear view mirror and sort of has this like like this violent reaction to it, which I don't know. I'm not too sure what's going on there. I'm really not too sure. Like, what is this film want us to think that he is not a morally sort of sound character, like he is gonna act out again? What do you reckon?
you know, I didn't really take note too much of the final scene, or you know, of the final shot itself. But you know, you know, I'm of the opinion that, you know, that sort of final scene is, you know, entirely imagined. So I don't really know what the intention of of, you know, Martin Scorsese was with there.
Hmm.
You know, I think, you know, we see, you know, as the audience, like this unfiltered version of this character. You know, the media and, you know, the public in general, you know, have seen, as you've said, you know, this sort of nice filtered version, you know, where he appears as this, you know, public hero, the savior of this little girl, you know, who put, you know, everything at risk, you know, including his life, you know, in order to save her. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think, you know, that moment, yeah, may well be, you know, as you've said, just a moment of this guy's dangerous. You know, he did this noble thing, but in a violent way, and you know, he is a danger, you know, beyond this one moment of glory.
Yeah. Do you reckon a lot of the scenes in the film just didn't happen? Because a lot of it is just him by himself. So it's kind of, it could be like you know, we'll mention the voices later on. It could be a scenario where like a lot of it, or even Fight Club, those kind of films, like a lot of it just didn't happen, or in that sense, or not how we think they happened. What do you reckon? Because there's a lot of scenes here where I kind of think to myself, it's sort of too good to be true here. Do you know what I mean? I'm not too sure. What do you reckon?
I mean, the only scene that I had I questioned really what was the last one, because I think that's the only one where there's
Yeah.
glorification. Where there is actually a fantastical ending. Where he's lauded as a hero, and there's maybe an open door for him to pursue a relationship with Betsy. But before that, he gets broken up with. He descends into this sort of broken emotional state, and then
Mhm.
and then he has to deal with the his perception of filth amongst the city, which
Yeah.
of course it includes him trying to save Iris. I mean, I guess him succeeding in rescuing her could maybe be called into question. But he did seem armed enough, and it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that this trained marine would be capable
Yeah.
of that. But
Mhm.
I think definitely the perception of him as a hero can be quite easily called into question.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, even I think part of the character is he's sort of he is something quite. He's not like your typical sort of New York taxi driver. I think that's part of the um the aura behind his character. For a first date with Betsy, they go to see a pornographic film, which is always a big mistake for
Yeah, I was
for a
just
first date.
taking notes,
Yeah,
because
taking notes.
for my next date, I'm just gonna be, I was like crossing out my ideas. For Christmas I got, as a bit of a joke from my family. I got a poster of, like a scratch off poster of, dates to go on, and I will
Mhm.
not be scratching off the porn theater one. I genuinely can't think of a more horrifying place to be. And it was in the moment where I was watching that scene, and I was just like, what am I putting Matthew through, honestly? Like, because we watched Shame last week, which I know
Yeah.
you'd already seen, but has many scenes of just Michael Fassbender's swinging penis.
It
And
does, does it? What
I
it
was just
does.
thinking, what have I brought to Paul Matthew? Like, poor
This is what
Matthew.
we do
And
for the
here
YouTube
in this
fame.
episode, there's sex is abundant amongst all the films that we watched today.
Yeah, I know it absolutely is, especially in I think Fight Club is definitely one of them. And but does Birdman have any naked scenes? There's Michael Keaton butt in Birdman, isn't
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Yeah.
So some Ed Norton butt as well.
Yes, there is a bit of Ed Norton butt as well. But I mean, yeah, Taxi Driver, I just have nothing but positive things to say. I think it's one of those films where I'm not sure which one I prefer, King of Comedy or Taxi Driver. I think I I don't know. It's I think Taxi Driver might edge it out slightly for me, in regards to like De Niro, Scorsese films of that era.
Yeah, I thought the concept of the King comedy was really strong, but I don't know, when I watched it, I felt like it was missing something.
Missing
I still
something
can't
exactly.
identify
Yeah.
what it was.
Hmm.
I didn't love the sort of like the woman that was obsessed with Rupert. He sort of followed
Yeah.
him around. That wasn't a character I appreciated, but yeah, even within the narrative of the film, I think maybe it was just a concept that couldn't sustain a feature film.
Mm,
But here, I think it comfortably lasts the entire time.
definitely.
This
Yeah.
is this is the first time I've watched a film in one sitting in a long time.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same actually. Yeah, even for Fight Club, I had to take a couple of sessions of it. The voices as well, and not Birdman. Birdman I actually watched in one sitting because it's phenomenal. But I think for me, Taxi Driver, it's very consistent tonally. It's a very smart film, and I think it's. I know it's one of those films where I haven't heard a lot about it. Obviously, you've heard a lot about the famous, you talking to me scenes and stuff. Obviously, it's a very well regarded film, but I don't think it's talked about. Is it? Do you think it is it talked about enough as like the up there as one of the best?
I mean, I've heard, Taxi Driver's a great film, from a multitude of sources, but I've never heard anything about its plot. Like, I went into this, entirely clueless to the plot, which is
Yeah.
rare,
Hmm.
because we'll talk about a few instances, especially in Fight Club, of having the ending spoiled for you. And I just feel like with any popular film, I know the like beat for beat what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
Exactly.
Birdman, which is only 7 years old, I was still pretty much aware beat for beat what was going to happen. I was just experiencing it. But here, I generally had no idea, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, for sure, mate. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Have you got any points
One
for Taxi
thing,
Driver as well?
well, we've talked a lot about fashion in the past, music.
We have.
But
We have.
what I really I'm just shocked about, the culture shock is just how easy crime was to do back then.
Oh yeah,
You just
definitely.
tell someone information about yourself, and there's no way to check if you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
You say your license is clean, and they say,
Okay then.
yeah, I trust you because you've definitely told me the truth. Here's a job. It
Yeah,
just seems so
it's
easy.
ridiculous.
No,
Yeah,
of
I
course I
know.
don't have a criminal record. They're like hired.
Yeah, I know. I've been watching a documentary called McMillions recently about these people sort of scamming, the McDonald's Monopoly game out of millions. Like they sort
Mm.
of manage to scam it and just get millions from McDonald's, which is interesting. Um, just to say, just putting out there, not involved, not involved. But yeah, I think it was really, especially with no sort of internet as well, and no, or the lack of sort of verification for things like that. Like Travis just walks in, he asks him a few questions which he could just bullshit about there and then he just gets the job. Like for all we know, his license could be, you know, ruined. Like he might not even have one. So it's very interesting. Like you just get away with shit like that.
Yeah, and you know, do you consider Travis a charming individual? Because he approaches Betsy, at the place that she volunteers, and she is somehow convinced in that moment, to go on a date with this guy who she's aware has been like creepily watching her from his taxi outside. Like,
He
to
doesn't even
me,
hide it.
no
He
matter
doesn't
how
even.
charming someone
It's so
is,
obvious. It's so obvious
yeah,
as well.
no matter how charming someone is, like, do not meet someone that is admitted to watching you all the time. He even says that, like, just be terrified of them,
Yeah, I'd
mace
want like
them,
he's not exactly yeah, he's not exactly conspicuous about it either, is he, man? Because he's just in this bright yellow vehicle. He's just outside the door, just watching
sipping
her.
his massive
Yeah,
drink.
yeah, and I don't know. I think he is part of De Niro is that he is just a charming individual, but there's something really unsettling about Travis for me. Um, it's so weird because that name is such a rare name, but we know someone by that name. So like,
Mm.
do you ever get that? It's such an unusual name. But yeah, something about Travis is quite unusual. Um, in the sense that like there's something not right about him. There's this rage inside. There's this sort of it is a bit like there is a bit of the Kevin Spacey American Beauty character there, isn't there?
I
There's
like
some
how we're back to comparing everything to American Beauty.
yeah. I
That,
mean,
that, that, that
the
was a trend
cyclist,
for,
the
for the
cyclist,
few months
mate.
following.
I think American Beauty is the best film of all time, in my opinion. I know that's a big
Oh
shout.
wow.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up there. Definitely up there.
I need to watch it again. It is incredible.
Mm.
But you'd mentioned before, people that you have now donned his taxi friends.
Taxi
You
Friends.
know, and there's this character named Wizard who pulls out some just horrible slurs, but
He
we'll not
does.
not go into that. And I just wanted to ask you. He sort of puts forward this idea that you become whatever your job is. You're defined by what you do as a career. And do you agree with that?
I, do, I, I don't, mate. I don't. I think you're like. I think that's for a lot of people. Like their career is their life, and I think that's the thing for the majority of people. But I think it's a very interesting one because obviously Travis, every scene we pretty much see him in, he's doing his job. Like he is by the nature of the titular character, he is the taxi driver. So I think it's a very interesting sort of idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I think no matter how much pride you take in your job, it shouldn't define you. I don't think it should ever be, what you devote the majority of your time to,
Yeah,
what you, think about all the time. To me, a job is a means of making money. And, if you can find deeper meaning in that, where you actively enjoy it, of course that's the dream. But
definitely. Yeah.
I'd like to think it doesn't define me, especially because I'm not optimistic about my career future.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I sort of heard True Geordie speak about this. It's like take what you do seriously, but not who you are seriously, which I think is a very interesting concept. And in this film also, sort of this is sort of a different point, but I wasn't too sure about this. There's a gentleman who comes into the back of Travis's cab, and he sounded a lot like the director Scorsese. Is that Martin? Is that a young Scorsese in as the passenger there?
Do you mean the weird guy who plans to kill his wife?
Yeah, yeah.
I have no idea, but honestly, that is one of the weirdest scenes I've ever seen in my life.
It's
It
just
played
so
out,
weird, isn't it?
it's so bizarre. Like, it's not even, sort of this like absurdist kind of thing. He's playing it like deadpan, but
Yeah,
even not in an ironic way. Like, that's just, how they've planned out the scene. And it's
yeah.
it's
I'm gonna Google
bizarre.
this. I'm gonna Google this.
And I sort of wanted to ask you about that because, Travis, of course, considers himself this warrior tasked with cleaning up his city. He sees himself as this hero or vigilante. He wants to remove the city of the filth that he thinks, Palatine and other politicians aren't capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And to that effect, do you think that means that he considers this guy killing his wife for her affair like a just punishment?
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, like you kind of mentioned, by the end of the film, he's kind of applauded for being this vigilante. And it does kind of seem like he does go down like the Arthur Fleck route of, he only kills people who deserve it. But that being said, like it kind of seems like the politician, he had planned to kill him, but the politician never really did anything for me to suggest that he deserved it. So it was
No.
kind of a very interesting one. I've Googled it, and it was actually Scorsese, which is
Oh,
interesting.
really?
Yes, that's such a weird scene. It sort of explains it why it's so different, because he wanted to appear in the movie, I guess, but it's just such a strange one to include.
Yeah, I like a lot of this film is sort of jarring and doesn't mesh, and it is, I think, intentional by design, as you've mentioned. There's sort of an imbalance in of
Mhm.
course his state, and then in the people's perception of him, that he's teetering on this balance between a violent criminal and people's hero.
Yeah.
And clearly he is ready to kill or harm for like his goal of cleaning up the street. But instead of like putting the money into the hands of Iris's pimp sport, maybe just blow his brains out. I would have
Yeah.
cheered in that moment. If he just approached the guy
Yeah.
and just killed
Liz
him.
Payne's like, yeah,
Honestly,
exactly.
like, it's a horrible thing to say, but if
I
you're
know what you mean.
facilitating that kind of horrific crime,
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
go to hell, quite
Yeah,
literally.
yeah.
And
Scorsese,
the
yeah, he doesn't
character of
hold back.
Travis in that moment, he goes a little too far. For me to sort of see him as this savior type for Iris. I think it's just bizarre that his big issue, with that situation seems to be, that she's a sex worker, not that she's a 12-year-old sex worker. He seems to put forward, the put first the issue that like he wants to get her out of this life, not I'm horrified because of your age.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about his character, I think he's so lonely, and I think he needs like, I don't know if attention is the right word, but he kind of needs people to sort of be interested in him, and so if that means killing the politician or killing these sort of these gangsters, these criminals, so be it for him anyway. So I think it's a very interesting one. It just so happens that he didn't kill the politician, so he is applauded. But I think it's very interesting, that fine line between he, by the end of the film, it is presented that he only killed people who, deserved it, so to speak. But I think it's such a marvelous sort of fine line of that sort of balance there. It is quite a narrow margin.
Yeah, because if he is, he's taking active steps to remove these criminals from the streets, and decrease the amount of
Yeah,
dangerous individuals on the
he is.
streets. So I think for that particular intention, he is admirable. But as you mentioned, his attempted assassination of Palatine is sort of where you call the question: should you have sympathy for him? And
Mhm.
it seems that his intention was maybe just to make a statement for his disgust over the city. But if that's the case, I don't know why you don't go after a famously corrupt political figure,
Yeah.
or even
Yes,
a public
exactly.
figure or celebrity,
It's a great point.
to portray that you have this disgust for people of that of that inclination. All he does really, and had he been successful, all he's done is kill an innocent man.
Mhm.
I don't really, I can't see the thought process there.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you, Callum, to be honest with you, 100%, dude.
I mean, of course, that's by design of the film,
Mhm.
because
Yeah, I
you
suppose so. Yeah, I
you
suppose.
want you
Yeah,
to sort of seesaw on this character.
yeah. I suppose it's just a character that doesn't fit in society. Albeit just going to see pornographic films, which he openly admits that. One thing about, he is honest. Like he just says, yeah, I go to see these all the time. A lot of couples go to see them, and he is right. Like there is other couples there who watch them, but I think it's a very weird thing to do. And also he just doesn't fit in, does he? He is quite lonely. He's a bit of an introvert, and yeah, even he's a bit of a phony as well. Like even when he's the politician, Palatine, or I think his name is, comes into the taxi, he's sort of like, what issues really speak to you? He's like, well, I'm a big fan of your work, but I actually don't follow politics at all. Really, I don't really have any. So it's a bit of an oxymoron in itself to claim to be such a big fan, but yet just not be interested in political views. So it's a very interesting sort of he's a bit of a fraud in that sense. But I think that's part of he's one of the most conflicted characters, I think, in a film that
Hmm.
I've seen. So yeah, I think it's a marvelous job.
So to sort of, get into what you think about the ending, how did you see it? Did you see it as, real or imagined?
I think imagined is definitely how I'm viewing it. Although it's the way he just looks at the wing mirrors, or so the rear view mirror. That's a little bit unsettling. So I think maybe it's left open ended, I suppose, isn't it? So I think it's a smart move, um, and I think it's kind of like Birdman, that aspect. Like, it is left open ended as to what actually happened. Was that real? Was it not real? I think potentially that whole it seemed a bit glorified for me to be real. So I'm going to go with the fake aspect there. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel that in the situation where Travis was in, where, he's taken such violent measures, in performing this, heroic act, because he does save Iris, he removes criminals from the equation. He has
Hmm.
done,
He
you
does,
know,
yeah.
he has done, an admirable act, honestly, because, that their crimes are so horrific that, I honestly don't have an issue. But, in reality, and especially at that time, you would be imprisoned without a question,
Yeah,
like
you
without
would.
a shadow of a doubt, no matter how admirable the thought process, the intentions are, you have committed a murder. So I
Mhm.
mean, he's not going to be lauded as a hero. He's not going to be, let out because he's, deep down a good guy. So I feel like it either must be his dying thoughts or simply, his fantasy as he's in prison.
Yeah, I think
Which
so.
has
I
been
think so.
put forward by, Roger Ebert, the famous reviewer. But I think it does maybe ruin the fun a little to go into it too much, because honestly, I usually, hate ambiguity. I like all the questions to be answered. But to be fair, the the assertion of the film is that, the film never puts in doubt that this happened. Because
Mhm.
we
Yeah,
see a lot of things that, sort of have clues where you're like, was that a dream? Or was it real? Here, there actually aren't those like clues or indications. We're just reading into it. So I mean, it's not like they've created it's not like by design they've created like, this question. We've, invented it for ourselves. I mean, not us, but the viewer. To be like, was that real? But it's not, that's not fault of the film. There's no ambiguity asserted by the film. We've just read into it and made
yeah,
it
exactly.
ambiguous.
Yeah, I think that's a really well articulated point there. I like films that leave it open ended. They keep you guessing, and I think part of the enjoyment is that I don't sort of come away with a fixed theory. I like the way it could just be anything. So yeah, that's why I like Birdman and Fight Club so much as well. Not the voices. No offense. I know, heartbroken. It
I
is
guess we'll
good,
get
but
into
it's
it.
funny straight up. But yeah, I think this film is just a marvelous character study of that Travis character. De Niro is absolutely remarkable here. It's the best performance that I've seen, and yeah. Do you have any more points in Taxi Driver, mate?
Nothing else from me, Matthew.
Well, I'd love to hear your rating, dude.
You know, it is honestly amazing, and this is probably the one that I put off watching most, or at least I was most hesitant to watch, because I think there's always a risk in watching, these really famous films that you've had on your movie bucket list for so long.
Yeah.
Because it can either exceed your expectations, or completely fail to meet them. And,
Mhm.
we've had definitely a mix of both. But this was a movie I knew nothing about, so I just approached it as, you know not famous, not popular, not one of the greatest films of all time, just as a film. And just as a film, it is spectacular. It's incredible. So I'd give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I think that's a good way of coming into a film, like not sort of. It's kind of maybe why you know, potentially why with films like the Godfather trilogy, you go in with these high expectations. It almost sort of the movie's almost a little bit your viewing experience is almost a little bit worse than if you never had that expectation at all. So I think that's a really smart way of looking into it. Just going into this film, just thinking it as a film without the context behind how great it is. And yeah, I have to concur. I think it is a 10. I think it's an absolute marvelous piece of film work here. It's remarkable. And one film, and again, which I think is also equally, if not more remarkable, is Fight Club. Now, you'd said to me off podcast, the twist in this film, it's very very well known, and amazingly, I had never heard of it. But
I
which
don't know
I
how.
don't know how either. I got away lucky, I guess. But
What was the other famous one that we watched that
Usual
you also
Suspects,
didn't know?
Usual Suspects, yeah,
Yeah, I have no idea how
insane.
you get to be an
Just got
adult and
lucky.
using the internet. Like, I probably knew this and The Usual Suspects for the last 5 years, and it's not as though I sought those out. So I mean, it is very surprising, honestly. Did you see it coming?
Maybe not in the way it presented it, but I kind of did see something going on with like, yeah, I don't know if Brad Pitt's character Tyler Durden is real, or
Yeah,
not. Maybe he's not who he says he is. There's something a bit off with him throughout the film. But I mean, this film, it's the weirdest film I've ever seen, but I think that works in its favor. Like it is so strange, but it works so well somehow.
yeah. Writing my notes were sort of a bit of a struggle, because honestly, I think that this is more of an experience than it is a film.
1,000,000%, million. It's one of those films like that. I think it's like a definitive film of that time. You know what I mean? People who watch this, like it's for a very particular age group. I think sort of that sort of people who are maybe not age group, but just people who are like experiencing like times in their lives where they just don't know what they want to do, or they're just sick of how they're living or whatever. So it's a really great. It's very. I'll cut to the chase. It's quite similar to American Beauty. You know what I mean? Not to go too much of that comparison.
Yeah,
But it is with the theme that it has. You know what I mean?
yeah. There is this kind of coming of age slash crisis kind of vibe about it.
Yeah.
American Beauty is him looking at a younger woman inappropriately because of his midlife crisis, but here it's sort of a crisis of you know of your concept of society.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Exactly. Yeah.
when it comes to the twist, I think there are two different kinds of twists. Ones that are breakneck, no preparation, which is sort of M. Night Shyamalan's approach, and that there are others with peppered clues
Clues.
within it,
Yeah.
and that's present within this film. There's a quote, maybe less than 2 minutes in, where the narrator says, I know this because Tyler knows this. So I mean, it was indicative, from the very start. And I don't know if you picked up on this, but in the first 20 minutes or so, before he meets Tyler Durden, there are intercut shots of Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden. Did you see this?
No, I don't think so.
Like whenever the narrator's like walking around his office, there's like glimpses of Tyler Durden like intercut
Is
within the
there?
shots. That's that parallels him sort of putting the frames of pornography within
Oh
the
yes, I know what you mean
projections.
now. Yes. Oh yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. That's
you glimpse him.
amazing.
And I'd heard about this, and I'd seen people breaking that down before, even before I'd seen the film. And I went in expecting that to be sort of imperceptible, but it's a lot clearer than I expected, which kind of makes me struggle to think that anyone was surprised by the twist, really.
Yeah, yeah, and I think. By the way, 1999. What a year for movies that was.
I know,
But yeah,
mad.
I know. But yeah, I mean, I think the Tyler Durden twist is absolutely remarkable. Yeah, and like you're saying, I love the subtle clues throughout the film. I didn't pick up on a lot of them, but from what I did, it was fantastic. And I think when I first started this film, I kind of thought this is going to be like a buddy cop film. And I think that was what the first half is. It's about them starting the Fight Club. It's about them building this empire against sort of society. But as it evolves, it becomes more about sort of Edward Norton's character. What's his name? What is his name?
He's only ever referred to as, well,
The
he's never
narrator.
referred to as anything, but he's
The narrator.
the narrator.
Yeah. I think it becomes more of a character study of him, and the narration is the best narration I've ever seen in a film, in my opinion. It's absolutely incredible. It works. It just does. It works really well.
Yeah, because usually it's a very high energy character, and then they like give this like soulless voiceover performance because because the actors just can't be arsed in the recording studio.
Yeah.
But here it's it is more of that, but it's very it's what is it's very consistent with the characterization we've seen
Yes.
of that
It
character
is.
throughout. And one big thing about this character, as we learn early on, is that he goes to support groups, to sort of that's the only cure for insomnia that he's encountered. Having a good cry at a support group. And I was just wondering, we learn that he goes under these false pretenses that he's had these illnesses or experienced these losses. Do you think that his silence in these support groups absolves him?
Well, I think it's a very fine line, isn't it? Going to the support groups where you don't actually have testicular cancer in this case, or tuberculosis in the other support group. Like it's sort of a cruel thing to do, to trick people into thinking that you have a serious illness. Like it's not something that you want to be fooling around with, because it's a very serious issue. But I think he is quite. I don't know if he is. I'm not sure if he's like as a mentally unstable character as some of the other ones in the films. Do you know what I mean? Like I think. What do you think? Do you think he is? I think clearly he is. Obviously, he's dealing with like a dissociative identity disorder, where like he's creating
Yeah.
alternate personalities here. But I'm not sure if it's. I'm not sure if like the narrator, as you know, it will say Edward Norton, like the narrator is like. I'm not sure if he is as conflicted as other characters. Like what do you think? Because I don't know if I can't really articulate what I'm saying here, but I kind of feel like he, you know, I don't know what I'm saying here, but what I'm trying to say is the Tyler Durden character almost seems like a figment of his personality, but that is not him. Like it's maybe
Yeah.
a small percentage of him, but it's not him, if you know what I mean. Like it's just a part of his psyche. You know, it's a very small percentage. What do you think?
Yeah, like we'll talk about the voices, but that character within that film is dangerous.
Yes, yes, that's
He's
what. Yeah,
consciously choosing to kill people. With the influence of the voices he hears, but he's making that decision. But here, the narrator is embodied by Tyler Durden, who is the dangerous one.
Yeah, the
Between the
narrator's
two
not
of them.
dangerous. Yeah,
Yeah,
agree there.
I definitely agree with you. But when it comes to whether he's a character with morals, we see that Marla's presence in the testicular cancer meeting indicates that they welcome visitors. So I mean, he clearly could have just declared his intentions for being there, said I'm just someone here to sit and listen and then provide the support to Bob.
Yeah,
I feel like
definitely,
he could have easily done that. So just him being silent and not declaring his intentions.
definitely.
Whether that's good or bad, it is wrong.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And you know what? One thing I find really interesting about this film is that it's actually based on a book, and apparently it does a lot
Mm.
different to the book. You know, apparently in the novelization, in the novel, they the first meeting between the narrator and Tyler Durden is actually on a beach, I think, or something, rather than in a plane. And
All right.
obviously, once you hear about like when the main sort of set off for me when I thought something's not quite right with Tyler Durden is when he introduces himself as like a soap manufacturer. I was like, that's quite a strange profession. Like something's weird going on. Something is weird going on here. But the subtle clues that points to him being a figment of the narrator is really, really remarkable. Like you never really see them interact in front of people, really, do you at all?
Mm. Yeah, and this is the instance. I was, it's weird how our chats line up with my notes. It's nice,
The
but you
connection, yeah.
know, when it comes to this film, I think this is a case where knowing the ending does diminish the viewing. The entire time, you've mentioned, they interact with each other, but rarely, is there, a group of three of them. Anytime, the narrator interacts with Marla, referencing, her having sex with Tyler. Tyler's often in another room telling the narrator not to speak about him. So I think my viewing was diminished by that idea, and because I feel like throughout the entire thing I was just distracted thinking of like the mechanics of the events playing out. Is
Yeah.
he just tossing himself about when they're fighting? And it turns out yes he is, which
That's
is
funny.
hilarious to watch,
I used
honestly.
to do that as a kid,
Especially
though. I used to do that as a
especially
kid.
near the end when he just tosses himself down the stairs.
I find it like I find it quite so that I suppose that provides an explanation for why Tyler Durden's like don't speak of me, because then that would sort of tip him off that there's more than one person or they're both the same person. Sorry, and also it's interesting to see that because I have to be honest, this is a film that I had to follow on Wikipedia as to what was going on a lot of the time, and correct me if I'm wrong. It kind of said that the Tyler Durden character was like a manifestation of a alternate personality whilst he was sleeping, which kind of makes me think was all the events that the narrator is present in the film. Is he? I was kind of confused as to like, is the narrator like cognizantly aware that he was there, or was he just like imagining he was there in the events, and was it just Tyler Durden? If you, I don't know, I can't really don't know if that makes sense, but it kind of seems to me that because they don't interact in front of each other, the narrator, when he's Tyler Durden, like the narrator does not exist, and likewise when the narrator, but at the same time, whilst the narrator exists, Tyler Durden also exists. So it's kind of confuses me as to sort of the practicalities of how that would work. in the sense that
Yeah, I think when they say that, he's asleep, they just mean that he's not in control of the body. So,
yeah, okay, yeah,
whenever they're at the Fight Club and they're both there, they even make a point of saying it in the film that it's inconsistent between, him being in the place of the narrator or him being in the place of Tyler Durden. Any dialogue delivered by Tyler Durden to the rest of the members of the Fight Club is the body of the narrator speaking that. But sometimes when he's, in the
yeah,
position watching that happen, that's the narrator in the place of the narrator. That's a difficult word to say,
yeah.
honestly.
I know what you
Or
mean.
the narrator in the place of Tyler Durden, and
Yeah,
then any time that he believes he's going to sleep, he's actually getting, I think the reference he in reality is getting like 1 hour of sleep because he's living two lives.
yeah. I know what it is, dude. Like it kind of is. It's so brutal when you think about it. When there is no Tyler Durden, like there is Tyler, and like he has to give himself that scar. Like he has to do that himself. Like it's not anyone there who's making that. Like he's burning his hand. It's like the narrator is he's not aware of it, but he is doing that to himself, especially like when he's throwing himself down the stairs and in the glass and stuff. Like it is so it's funny to watch like CCTV footage, but it must be so brutal. Like it's horrible to think about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to get onto sort of the big iconic parts of the film,
Yeah.
I think we of course have to reference the rules of Fight Club,
What's the
and
first rule of Fight
to
Club, Callum?
me,
What is the first rule of Fight Club?
I think it's don't talk about Fight Club,
It
isn't
is
it?
the rule of Fight Club. I like it. I
But
like it.
what confused me about that is why don't you want people to talk about Fight Club? Fight Club's
Yeah.
great, and what is your concern? I don't think it's illegal to just beat people up in a basement consensually.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like it kind of gets me think. Like imagine a real life. I'd imagine a real life Fight Club. I mean, there's probably thousands of them. Maybe not titled Fight Club, but I'd imagine that sort of thing happens all over the place. But yeah, yeah, it seems like it just seems like people just go there, just office workers, just to let their hair down. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it really amuses me when like when Tyler Durden's like, yeah, you got to get into a fight with someone, and then this guy with like a hose just sprays a minister, and the minister just starts hitting him. It's absolutely priceless, mate. I
I love
absolutely love
that.
it. Yeah, it's
But
great.
where some sort of like political upheaval films sort of encourage sometimes, well, not by design, but sometimes it just gets in the popular idea, and some people take that as a call to violence.
Mhm.
Sometimes, do you feel like that this film probably inspired
Oh yeah,
similar
I think
similar
so.
Fight Clubs?
I think so. I think it probably was a bit of a. It's got the message of like because by the end of the film they kind of say, yeah, we're just erasing the debt so that we can start off from zero and things like that. And it's clearly like they're rebelling against the societal expectations of the country at the time. And I think that's definitely stands through that probably did inspire a few people to sort of question their own lives. And I think it's healthy to question your own life, but I think maybe when you're like at the dangerous point is like when you're letting that kind of actually affect you when you violently if if you follow the Tyler Durden rule book in that sense. But I think it's important that like you watch movies and you sort of question things about your own life, because at the end of the day it's people who make them, so I suppose they're relying on their own experiences somewhat. But I think this film is sort of it's a great film for like young men, I would say, just to sort of
Hmm.
experience. It's an experience, mate. It really is. Like you said, that's a brilliant way of putting it. It is an experience. And I think it's one of those times where, like, upon rewatch, you can just notice more and more new things about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Within this episode, I think we're going to talk a lot about responsibility. Who
Mm,
is responsible for the actions of the characters within the film.
yeah,
And here, do you think that the narrator is like whatsoever responsible for Tyler's actions?
it's interesting because he's clearly got some sort of, as we're saying, like DID disorder. I think, as to
Yeah.
he himself believes he's not doing the actions, but he actually is. Obviously, we see like there's a sort of a flashback to where Tyler Durden is speaking, but it's actually Edward Norton. You know what I mean? So it's oh, sorry, it's actually the narrator. I'll try not to confuse the actors' names. But yeah, it's a very interesting one as to who is responsible. I think by law, it's hard to say. Probably Edward Norton, the narrator, would be responsible for it. But when you look at the content behind it, there's a lot more going on. It's quite clearly he believes it's someone else. Like he actively doesn't want to be involved, and as the Fight Club's crimes become more violent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and here I think it is a different story to what we'll talk about in the voices, because here he's not hearing an influencing voice that convinces him to do things. Like he is Tyler Durden, it's his alternate personality.
Mhm.
And I think had this been made in 21st century, that would have been identified as you said, as dissociative identity disorder. Because he seems to have no control over Tyler Durden, and seems completely ignorant to his illness. So I think, yeah, in the moral level of responsibility, at least until the ending scene, which we'll talk about, sort of the shakiness of that, how he
Yeah, I
sort of
think.
stands and watches the explosions.
Mhm.
I think up until that point, he's absolved morally, at least.
Yeah, in regards to the ending, obviously you can hop back to the film as well if we need to, but I think for me, in my head, I sort of play it out. Let's say it's left ambiguous as to his sort of reaction to the whole the building exploding around him and Tyler Durden's plan succeeding. But it kind of seems to me that like he's sort of broken free of Tyler Durden by obviously shooting himself. But it kind of feels by the end, I almost feel like he has become Tyler Durden. Like he's like, oh, this is actually not bad. I kind of want this to happen. Like he kind of sees what Tyler's coming from. Obviously, by the end, you can see like the little glimmer of the edit of Tyler Durden's influence still being there. So I actually think by the end he sort of becomes what he didn't want to be. By the end, he actually sees the light, so to speak. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, like, visually we see the death of Tyler Durden, his head explodes. But I still think by the end, it is in question which of the two actually survived. Because for me, he seems, far too content with the explosions to be the narrator that we've seen throughout the rest of the film.
Agreed.
So that sort of opens up the question that I wanted to ask you, and that's which of the two personalities is the original identity of the character, and which is the alter? Because I think there is room for debate here, because we know that it's in theory Ed Norton's body, and we learn that near the end Tyler says the narrator created him, but that the narrator created him. I said that so weirdly.
You're right.
His personality, the personality of Tyler Durden is the sort of blank slate for his agenda. So I mean, for me, I think it's still possible that Tyler is the original and he manifested the narrator as a
I think so.
conscience to
I
sort of
think that's a
balance out
really interesting theory.
his
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's really, sorry,
Sorry,
mate, I
I
cut you off there.
sorry.
That was my bad. I cut you off there. No, I kind of think that's a really interesting theory because I think you can look at it both sides. You can look at it from the side of the narrator where he's quite clearly he's sort of sick of his office life. He doesn't, and then he feels like he has to create this figure who, as by Tyler's admission, like he looks like he wants to look. He dresses like he wants to look. He has sex how he wants to have sex. You know what I mean? He's sort of like his perfect sort of maverick figure. Whereas I think it could also be played from Tyler Durden's perspective, as in like he needs someone to fit in, so he needs to create this boring office worker who has insomnia. Like he has to create that figure. So I think it can work from both sides. For the both of them have to try and fit into the narrative that fuels their agenda. So I think that Tyler Durden is the original. For me, I think that's a really interesting theory because by the end, like you said, the reaction of the narrator is not how I would expect. He just holds Marla's hand and just allows it to happen pretty much. Obviously, it would be too, would be over already from to try and stop it. But I think it'd be really interesting if he was obviously I think he still looks like Edward Norton, like he is Edward Norton, but I think he has like Tyler Durden's personality there. Like I think the narrator's gone for me, which I think it's interesting. It's open ended, isn't it? Open ended.
Yeah, definitely. And I again, it massively surprises me because I know myself and I know I don't usually like ambiguity. But where you can ask questions rather than the film, just leaving you sort of high and dry, with these questions. We've come up with that, after the fact. I think there's much more merit to that within the film.
Agreed.
So I'm sort of surprised that I appreciate how this film and Taxi Driver ended, but I really love the
Definitely,
sort of
mate.
debate you have in your own mind about
Yeah.
the reality of it.
1,000,000%.
And we of course learned this sort of recontextualizing twist, where you question everything that you've seen up to this point. And I just feel I would have preferred a more integral character than unnamed barkeep, to be the one that shatters that illusion, really.
Yeah, I agreed. I think it's really interesting. It sort of the reveal comes at a moment where I didn't really expect it. I would kind of expect it where Marla is involved in it, but it is the unnamed bartender that kind of tips him off that like you are Tyler Turden, like you called in here a second ago or whatever. Like you know what I mean? It's really unusual, and you'd think the Fight Club guys would be a lot smarter than just to keep referring to him as Sir, even though they're bound to be aware that he has alternate personalities. You'd surely think that everyone's aware of it. But I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
because then Bob like approaches the narrator and says, I go to Fight Club, and what do you think of this? What do you think of the guy who created it? And I can't believe that someone else would be responsible for the running of the Fight Club on the day that Bob is attending, other than the Tyler Durden side of the narrator. So I mean, he must have seen him.
Yeah, and it kind of gets you thinking if with the whole, it was clearly like an orchestrated plan from. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards it was Tyler Durden was the original personality, because it almost seems like too much of a coincidence that like the narrator just found this abandoned house. Like I think for me, the Tyler Durden character has existed for years and he's been planning this. So clearly like he's bought this house, this like abandoned house where it serves as their HQ. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of played out that Edward Norton's narrator just finds Tyler Durden by chance and ends up at the house because I think his apartment burned down. So I think it also revealed that he burned his own apartment down. But I don't know. I think that Tyler Durden has to be the original personality here. He must be.
Yeah, I mean it is hard to prove either way, and I think a lot of evidence that will point to Tyler Durden being the creation of the narrator. I mean it is that there's just so much to question here. Of course Tyler, admits and says himself that he was a creation of the narrator, but the narrator is so fragile and confused. Like he doesn't he can't comprehend that. So I mean, you could say that Tyler is equally confused and he doesn't understand that he's been around just as long. So I mean, it's it's hard to call honestly. And I think any evidence that you can point to could be refuted by it's two personalities. You have no idea what's actually happening really. Of course. In reality, we know that whoever was the original personality, the body that contains these two personalities looks like Edward Norton, and his perception of himself looks like Edward Norton. So I mean that is That's probably the strongest piece of evidence. But it's a fun one to speculate about.
Yeah, it makes me think I miss Edward Norton in the MCU. Like even though Mark Ruffalo, we both love him, Edward Norton was a great Bruce Banner. I think Edward Norton's incredible. I didn't really appreciate him as much as I should have back then.
And we'll talk about him in Birdman.
He's great in Birdman as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Just talk about Tyler's sort of intentions behind his plans. Behind Project Mayhem. The Tyler side of the narrator. In the exchange on the plane, seems to desire people to live only with what's necessary for survival. But I feel like if you want to ensure the survival of everyone, like launching the world into chaos probably isn't the way to go.
Yeah, agreed. Like, do you think part of the narrator's subconsciousness is still in Tyler, where he doesn't want to hurt people? Like that's what you clearly see. Like Tyler says, yeah, we evacuated everyone out of the building and stuff. Like there's no one in them, which almost seems like that's got to be a lie for a start. But anyway, like, do you think part of the narrator's subconscious is in Tyler? Because clearly, like, there is parts of Tyler where he's a nice guy. Maybe not a nice guy, but he's like, if you treat Tyler Durden with respect, you'll get respect back. That's how I'm kind of feeling towards it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think he has a conscience definitely, because the only time that he's physically violent, as in actually harming people, is in Fight Club where it's consensual. And then the times even when he like holds up the guy from the grocery store, that's actually
Guns empty.
He in his opinion he wants people to he wants to free people from the societal expectations of them, and
that's a great scene,
live the life that they want to lead.
That's a great scene.
So I mean it's a very interesting idea, and clearly the I mean it is terrorism to blow up that many buildings, because I mean he may well have evacuated the buildings, but what about the people walking past them? There would have to be a few casualties there. But I think it's more meant as a message than an act of terrorism, at least by his intentions.
Dude, I think we could just do a podcast just in Fight Club. Like we could just talk about this for days. I think there's so much great moral questions as to who's responsible. If the narrator's consciousness is in Tyler, then part of him is responsible for it, even if he's not aware of it. But likewise, I don't think Tyler's he's clearly a messed up dude, but I wouldn't say he's evil. You know what I mean? He's like the gun that he was going to shoot the guy with is empty. It's revealed. So I think it's such a remarkable film. It really is. It's so much talking points to it.
I don't have anything further on the film.
No, nothing from me, mate. In that case, I'd love to hear your rating for Fight Club.
So again, this is it's hardly a film. It's you know, it's sort of you know, it ends with this, very poignant moment, where it has, the swelling piece of music, and it does kind of come across as a sort of music video almost. It's this
Yeah, it does,
tale
doesn't it?
told to music, and I mean that in a positive manner. I would normally mean that in a critical manner, but I don't know. It's where, you watch this and you're sort of washed over by it, and it's an experience. But I can't really identify a plot, as such. It's
Yeah.
this guy wants to, reduce the city or the country, to its knees, to remove the history so people can live freely, at least by, his standards of what he believes that to be. So I mean, there isn't a massive amount going on, especially for the runtime. So I didn't really have, many plot based points. So it was a weird one, but I loved
Was it
it.
weird? Yeah,
I
it was
loved
so
every
weird.
minute of it. I watched it, back to back with Taxi Driver, and I didn't stop it once. So I have to give massive credit to that. That it was able to fully captivate me. I'd give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to concur. I'd have to agree. It's one of those films where plot-based points were lacking, but I think it's just got so much moral and responsibility questions that you can sort of deliberate over and talk about. And I think I could talk about this movie for hours, mate. It's so good. That's a good film when you can talk about it and still think about it after the cameras start rolling. And the ending is incredible with the music. So the music definitely does not fit the scene, but that's definitely intentional. Like it's kind of like the evil Morty sort of vibe that it's going for. There was like the really upbeat music, but a really not upbeat music, but like music that just doesn't fit the gravity of the situation. I mean, this is a 10 for me. This is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. It's so good, right up there in the top 10 for me. I think in terms of quality films, it's so good. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I suppose another film which stars Ed Norton, as you said, is Birdman. Now, I remember when this film came out, this film like absolutely dominated awards back in the day. I think it was like 2014, around that, 2015. I can't remember. But yeah, I think I remember this film being like really critically acclaimed. And back then I was silly. I thought it was like a superhero movie by the title of it. And I suppose there is elements of that with like he's an actor who used to play a famous hero called Birdman, but this film is so much more beneath the surface. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and something that I find a lot, with sort of these like Oscar bait films, is that I often don't appreciate them. I think that there's a bit, there's a sense of full of themselves, about them. I sort of got that, with films of the last few years that, were sort of up for all the major awards. And here, I thought there'd be this sort of intense snootiness because, a lot of it is criticism of the fact that, superhero actors end up washed up. And, I think this movie is probably perfect, for kids who love superheroes as kids, but sort of become disillusioned with the
Yeah,
movies that
agreed.
come out recently. I think people who are like, I hate Marvel, I hate DC, they're all stupid. I think this is probably the film for you, but also just films it's a film for a fan of films because
Oh yeah,
it's an
agree.
examination of Hollywood and how it treats its actors, which I mean is usually favorably, but here how it treats aging stars, and actors who are considered past their prime. So I mean, it was just not the movie I expected, and it was so much better than I expected.
1,000,000%. Michael Keaton is like the perfect casting for this, especially with the context that he used to play the most famous superhero of all time. In the same sort of era in which the Birdman films that were said, like I think they said like 1992, which I think was that the final performance of Keaton in Batman Returns or something, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is just a marvelous. I think this is, in my opinion, it's up there with some of the best as in terms of the quality of the movie. Like it wouldn't be like it's not my favorite movie of all time. It's definitely up there, but I think in terms of a quality of the movie, the one takes are sensational. The way it
Mm.
just lets the scene play out. There's no unnecessary edits. It actually feels like, in a sense, that you're actually in the room with them, and like they don't feel like actors whatsoever. They actually feel like, well, they do. Well, they are playing actors, but they feel like actors in real life. They don't feel like they're actors playing actors. You know what I mean? That it feels like real people. It feels like just how I would imagine Michael Keaton would feel. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just incredible. So good.
You know, when I'd heard about sort of the one shot idea, you know, of the editing style, you know, where they make it look like it's, you know, one take. I think there's 24 like hidden edits. You know, there's videos on YouTube which sort of expose that. And you know, whenever I heard that, you know, I sort of considered that it was probably going to be a better idea than it would be in execution. But watching it's amazing,
Oh,
you
it
know.
is, mate.
But
It's
it
so
kind of
good.
lead me down this rabbit hole where I was looking for edit points, where I was like, hey,
Yes,
close that
yes.
door, edit point.
Yeah, I definitely like. It's kind of a similar thing to how the Daredevil TV show does the one take scenes where there's very cleverly hidden edits in there. But yeah, I think what the part of this film is so good. It's like it is a character study of this actor. I can't remember what. It's quite an unusual name he has. I can't remember what it is.
Regan Thompson.
Regan Thompson. Yeah. So it's a phenomenal character study. And he has this, obviously by the name of this podcast, he has a voice going on in his head, the Birdman. I think he refers to it as like the Birdman voice. It's just so menacing. It's just so like haunting. Like it just gives you chills up your spine. The Michael Keaton voice there.
Yeah, I mean, I wish he'd used that and translated that to Batman, because Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman from the 1990s Batman series, devised this idea that he would have a higher voice for Bruce Wayne and a deeper voice for Batman, so that they felt like two separate entities. But Michael Keaton seems to have sided with that here, but what wasn't present in his portrayal before, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the conceit of this film is that Regan Thompson is putting on this play to sort of salvage his career. And I was just wondering, do you like the theater, Matthew? I don't
I
have
love the
many
theater.
notes on the plot, so
We've been to the
I've just
theater together, actually. So we have. We went to see. Can you hear me? Okay. But yeah, we actually, funnily enough, went to the last time I was at the theater was when we went together. Not well, it wasn't
yes,
just us two. I have to confess, it was with a
no.
group of people with a project of ours, where we went to see. I think it was Mamma Mia, wasn't it? It was Mamma Mia.
Was that the most recent one? Yeah, it was.
It was good.
I
It was
was
very good,
thinking
wasn't it?
I was thinking A Streetcar Named Desire.
It was good as well. I mean, we've went to the theater a few times actually. Yeah, Streetcar Named Desire was very good. It was more of a local play. But yeah, the last one we went on was on a trip to London with Cash. Actually, coincidentally, he's been on the channel a few times. Good fun that was. Do you like the theater? Because
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
I prefer musicals because I feel like there's sort of an experience to be had there where I feel like in regular theater I don't know, it makes me feel uncomfortable to like watch something live, to have a live
Yeah,
reaction to something, have them
yeah.
look at you while they act. I don't know, there's something
It's a bit
off-putting about that
unsettling.
to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you
Like
mean.
the idea that you can't get up and leave because that would be considered rude.
Yeah, yes, I know what you mean. Especially if like it was a more of a, more of a personal sort of audience. If it was more of a local production, it makes it a bit more awkward. But yeah, do you think part of Michael Keaton is like he is a bit resentful towards the whole superhero industry? I think that's why he took the role. Part of me thinks he is. You know what I mean? Even though he did
I
Vulture
don't
after
think
this.
so.
Even though he did Vulture
Well,
after this, yeah.
There's a video where he gave a speech at a graduation where he ended with saying I'll leave you on two words, I'm Batman, and I feel like that reads a lot like he loves it.
Yeah, I know. Like the excuse me, the Birdman persona in here is like I absolutely love it because like he sort of tells Regan Thompson like you're like the original star, like all these guys pale in comparison to you, like you're the man. Like he's boosting his ego. I absolutely love that. It really reminded me of like Ben Stiller's character in Tropic Thunder, where like he used to be a successful actor with this huge franchise that's not like falling off the ropes, and he's like doing these small productions. It was very very similar to that actually. That's one film I don't know how we can review. I really want to review it.
No,
We can't review
yeah,
it
I don't
ever.
want to review it.
No. But yeah, I think I just one character I haven't even mentioned in this film is Edward Norton's Mike. What a bastard! What an absolute
Like I want to put
twat.
it to you: has Edward Norton ever played a pleasant character in his life?
I don't know. I think he's quite pleasant in the Incredible Hulk, isn't he? I don't know.
No, like he's this annoying loser, and then in Collateral Beauty he's this like corporate bureaucrat who wants to like abuse Will Smith, like who's this who's this like divorcee who's lost his daughter, and he's like, yeah, let's trick people into thinking he's insane so we can steal his shares of
Do
the
you think he's a
company.
one-trick pony?
I think it's just that people have the perception that he's an unpleasant man, so they cast him in
Yeah,
roles of unpleasant men.
he has that
I
look
have
about
no
him.
idea what Ed Norton is actually like. I haven't even seen an interview of him, but people seem to have this perception that he's unpleasant and difficult to work with. I have no basis to refute or to agree with that. So I'm not going to put anything forward.
He gives
But
me Tobey
I
Maguire
mean,
vibes.
yeah, he gives me Tobey Maguire vibes exactly, where he's like, he seems like this like lovable scamp, and all of his characters have redeeming qualities, but there is an underlying like narcissism and unpleasantness.
Yeah, I remember a few months ago he did an interview with Joe Rogan on his podcast, and it's really good. So I'll link that in the description if I can find it. But yeah, it's absolutely marvelous. He's a really interesting guy. But yeah, I think the Mike character is, I mean, it's a very good performance. Like he has an amazing outburst during a preview, which is in front of everyone. Like, because I think someone replaced his gin with water or something. So in front of everyone at a preview, he goes mental. And also, like, one of the darkest scenes I think I've ever seen is when like he tries to have sex with his, I think it's his ex-wife or his girlfriend, whilst on stage when she clearly doesn't want to. Like it's actually like horrifying.
Yeah, it is played for laughs, but I think that is that's the film recognizing maybe the trivialization of that kind of
Yeah,
struggle within Hollywood.
yeah,
It's like
definitely.
it's a tough scene to watch, honestly,
Oh, it
because it
is.
is then
Yeah,
played for laughs when he emerges from the bed fully erect.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it is strange how they play it, but I think it's by design, because
yeah.
this
Oh,
is sort of
completely. Yeah,
a deconstruction of the treatment of Hollywood actors.
for
I
sure.
mean, the negativity around that.
Hmm.
But from the beginning of the film, we see that Reagan isn't particularly appreciative of his cast. He's giving notes to this guy Ralph, who it's unclear whether he's joking. Whether he made the thing fall on his head, because I
Yeah.
think he of course believes that he has telekinesis, so he maybe is convinced that he pulled that down from the ceiling. But is he also saying that he like paid a sound guy or like a lighting
Shit
guy
to
to like
push it off.
unscrew
Yeah,
some bolts? Like like they don't make that clear, because
classic.
the film ends before that sort of court case proceeds, so we don't really know.
Well, it's an interesting, like, I suppose in that sense, like the ending of the film. Obviously, we can jump back to other plot points if we need to, but the ending of the film is really interesting because obviously we see that. I'll talk about the very end. The main crux of the ending for me is his sort of attempted suicide on the stage. That's really the integral scene in the film. But for me, the ambiguity is to like, as weird as it sounds, as to whether he actually is Birdman or not. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because obviously he jumps out the window and sort of Emma Stone's character just looks up and smiles, which kind of would suggest that. But for me, anyway, I think he's probably just he's just leaning on the roof like she did earlier in the film. You know what I mean? But
Right.
it's such an interesting. Like, do you think he killed himself in the end, or what do you reckon?
I mean, I did write, did he fly or did he die?
Yeah, he did. He
Which,
fly? Did he
I think
die? What
is
do you
a
think?
fun question to ask. But, I think I loved how the film ended, but I would have equally loved, if it ended on the full stop of him shooting himself in the head on stage, because
Yeah,
I think then you understand the connotations for how that would be perceived, which we see, play out, that, he gets sort of lauded for, his performance being, this hyper realism. And I think we would have got that, even if it had been like a full stop, that's how the film ends. I think that would have been great. Here, I think it's an equally great ending, however, and I don't know, because previous previous fantastical elements within the film are pretty much disproved. We see him, from someone else's perspective, tearing up his room, and then the taxi driver, during the flight sequence says like, he forgot to pay me. So here, I'm really not sure. I'm wondering that maybe Emma Stone her smile is maybe just because she shares her father's lack of grip on reality. I don't. I I mean, of course, we're never going to get an answer for this, but
I think it's a
the
dream.
realism with
I think he actually is dead. I think it's like a taxi driver scenario where like that is what he wants to be like. I think even
yeah,
it just seems too weird that he's got like this facially reconstructed nose. It was a very strange thing. Like he's applauded for it. I think I just think he did die, and that's his dream, or that's his daughter's vision of what he actually did. You know what I mean? I don't think it actually happened. but hey.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that he was in the hospital, but did he fly away is a difficult one. I mean, again, it is just it's just senseless speculation at this point because I mean, I don't think there's ever an answer, and I don't know that it was ever constructed with an answer in mind.
Mhm.
I like the idea that he became Birdman because he seems like overall like he's a guy who's just trying very hard to recover his career and find meaning in sort of a seemingly meaningless existence. Which I mean is it's a saddening
It
thought,
is. Yeah, it
but
is. Yeah.
if he reconciled that with needing to with in his mind needing to take his own life, it's deeply sad. So I mean, I hope that
Yeah.
it's a nicer thought that he found meaning in his life by becoming Birdman.
Yeah,
So
definitely, mate.
that's sort of in my mind
Definitely.
how I like to view the ending that
Yeah.
he did actually fly
Yeah,
away.
definitely. Like I absolutely adore the scene where like he's flying through the city, like he's finally happy. Like I think part of the character Regan Thompson, like he does want to be Birdman, like he does want to be successful, but at the same time, I think he wants to prove himself. That's not all he can do. Like he is more than just that. Sort of, it's sort of the similar thing to sort of Fight Club, like because society has expectations of you, that's what you should do. It's kind of like because he's an actor who starred in these sort of blockbusters, that's all they can do. And I think that's probably what a lot of actors think. Like, I imagine actors probably like the Rock feels like he's just limited to these action films, where I'm sure maybe he would want to do more serious roles. So I think that's probably the reason why he's sort of been typecast as a sort of old superhero. But that being said, I actually think he quite enjoys it. Like he's like, oh, I think the Birdman's like that. Let's make Birdman 4. You know what I mean? Like I think part of him, the subconscious, his subconscious does want him to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you worry about your legacy?
It's a good question. I'm not really anymore. It used to be a big
Yeah.
thing, like it's how do you want to be remembered, sort of thing. I don't really want to be anymore. Just I'm not really too fussed about it. Just as long as I'm living how I want to live happily, I don't really care about what anyone else thinks of it. You know what I mean? What about yourself, dude?
Yeah, I care about what people think of me, but I don't care how many people that is. There's people who are clearly desperately seeking fame, and people who have fame who
Yeah.
are desperately trying to hold on to it. I'm really unconcerned with that. I just want to as you said live a life that I'm happy with, and hopefully leave a lastingly positive impression on the people around me.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. Absolutely. And that's why I love this film so much. Like it makes you question things about yourself. And I think, excuse me, I think this film is just such a marvelous sort of view of like an actor's world, and how sort of different that sort of big blockbuster genre is from the sort of the local theaters. In this case, obviously the theater here is still on Broadway, like it's still a very famous sort of scenario. But even even Regan Thompson's such an interesting character. Like I'm glad though there's not a sequel to this film. I think this works as a standalone film perfectly for me anyway.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. If they answered the questions, I think that would take all the fun out of the ending. Well, I mean, obviously, if you take in the potentially, negative connotations of the ending, so there's obviously nothing fun about that. But I'm in the virtue of ignorance side of the title of the film, where I
Yeah.
believe he did become Birdman. And I want to fully accept that. Because the other potential is deeply sad. But
Hmm.
you mentioned that this sort of shows what happens to actors, but it also portrays different acting styles.
It
And I may
does.
just say, I just want to put this out there: method actors, they're the worst.
Yeah, I think people like, yeah, I agree with you, because I think when people, if an actor comes out and says, yeah, for that role I did a method acting, I think that almost they kind of want you to feel as if their performance should be applauded more. It's a thing with Jared Leto that was obviously famous with the Suicide Squad production, where like he would send dead rats and used condoms to Margot
Yeah, like
Robbie's trailer.
he does refute some of that, but I don't know. Like
Yeah.
because sometimes people do just confer and say what would be the what's going to be like the clickbait headline for this. So Margot Robbie and her team may have been like, oh, we had weird correspondence with Jared Leto, but I mean he did undoubtedly like convince himself he was the Joker.
Yeah, for sure. It's a thing we've talked about with Christian Bale many times here in the channel, like be it with the Terminator films, or Batman, or whatever it may be. I really respect his grind for like transforming his body physically. Like that's a big that's a big leap. But I just think Christian Bale especially strikes me. I don't even, obviously I don't know him personally or anything, but from interviews and obviously with set outbursts that we've talked about, he does strike me as the type of guy who feels like he should be justified for doing that. Like his performance should be applauded more. Like, I think an actor who does method acting as a potential method as compared to an actor who doesn't, I don't like. There's no real difference in performance for me, really. Most of my favorite actors don't do method acting. You know what I mean? So that's how I
Yeah.
feel about it. What about you?
Yeah, you're just making the set unpleasant for the crew and the cast.
It just makes
Like
things
if you
awkward,
can't
doesn't it?
like show up and do your job, like that it just seems like you're no longer an actor. You're like you're one of the people that this episode is about. That you have to embody this other person. It just seems like
Yeah.
if you can't be yourself, learn the lines, and then act. Like are you even are you an actor or are you insane?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, method acting. I think it's a podcast topic for sure, potentially in the future, as to what we think of it. But that being said, I think I respect a lot of actors who do it. Like Christian Bale, I respect his body transformations are absolutely incredible. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I mean,
I
I think the body transformation is integral to the characters that he plays.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I feel
agreed. Yeah.
like in that scenario, if you as a studio know that he's going to put himself through that much punishment, maybe don't cast him, maybe save him from himself almost.
Yeah, no, agreed. And it can't be good for him either. Like going from
No,
120 pounds in The Machinist or whatever to like 200, 300 pounds for Bruce Wayne, Batman. Like it can't be healthy, for him. But hey, if he wants to do it, who am I to say? Who am I to judge? But I mean
yeah, because I
that
mean,
go ahead.
Tom Hardy is like always a big lad, but even he said like getting into the Bane shape has like destroyed his body forever.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine so. I can imagine so. Like that's a lot of. I remember watching like Chris Evans talk about his role for Captain America, and he just said about how it was just like chicken after chicken after chicken, like just force feeding himself, like force feeding. Like from experience, it's not fun. Like, it really isn't. Like it's absolutely
No,
horrifying to do. I hate it.
it is dreadful.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, respect to the actors who do that. I know that most of the Marvel movie actors. I'm not sure if there's like a company policy that they have to get in shape, but a lot of them have done it. It's less of a thing now. I think we talked about that recently. It's less of a thing now than it used to be. That I think, especially that sort of a few years ago, it was a big thing. But yeah, I mean that wraps up my thoughts on Birdman, mate. To be honest with you, I'm rambling here at the minute. Anything else from yourself?
Just a few quick comments.
Go for it, mate.
We see the moment where Reagan, travels through Times Square, and he gets accosted by several people.
Yeah,
And
he
I was
does.
just wondering, as a question, into who you are really. If you saw a celebrity on the street, would you ask for a photo? Because the situation that's presented here, they just all come across as dicks.
Yeah, in this situation where this is clearly a man who's in trouble, where like he's been locked out, like sort of almost naked, I definitely wouldn't ask him for a photo then. Like that's not the time. There's a time and a place. Even if you're never going to see that guy again, like just still you wouldn't do it. It's like it's kind of an interesting thing. I've never really had the opportunity to do this, to like ask for a photograph of a celebrity or anything like that. But I know I probably wouldn't. I'm not really too bothered about that anymore. Like a photograph is nice and stuff, but just I think just seeing them in the flesh is enough for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I think photographs taken on the spot are rarely great anyway. I think if they were entirely alone and looked up for meeting other people, I would maybe approach them, speak to them, and
Yeah,
then if they
agreed.
said, "Do you want a photo?"
Definitely.
I take one. But if someone looked in distress whatsoever, I would not even make eye contact with them.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
someone is adamantly pursuing getting away from all these people, like do not accost them.
Michael Keaton gives you those vibes that like I just wouldn't want to mess with him. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, I don't know. He seems like
he
a
seems
lovely
sweet.
guy.
He does seem really sweet, but like I think there's a switch there where it could get really angry. I don't know. He seems like a lovely guy though. He's one of my favorites actually, Michael Keaton. I think he's really, really great. Um
Yeah.
and I mean yeah.
Well, that moment, leads up to him, entering the audience and that becoming, part of the performance. And
Amazing.
honestly,
Yeah.
they never really highlight the success that should have been. I feel like coming up through the audience during the performance is great. I thought
Yeah.
that was going to lead to, like a moment of a glowing review of, how he sort of involved the audience.
If that happened in real life, I would not think that was a mistake. I would think that's definitely intentional. Like that was incredible.
Yeah, I mean,
If that
maybe
happened in real life,
him,
I'd love
creating a gun with his fingers, maybe
it.
questionable, but the fact that he just looks like, I mean, in the moment he's playing, a suicidal man who's, potentially gonna kill the woman that no longer loves him. So, him coming up just in like an insane wig like just in his pants, like holding his gun. Sorry, like holding his
Finger
fingers as a gun. Is like, of course that makes perfect sense.
Amazing. Yeah, like even if that happened and he had the finger gun, I would just think he's just forgotten the prop. Like I wouldn't think that was just an accident or anything. I would absolutely love that if that happened. But yeah, it felt like I was in the audience in this at that point in the theater. Like it felt like I was watching a real life production. You know what I mean? It was incredible, and that's just the one takes really add to that. The one takes are marvelous here, really good.
Yeah. What one thing that we've talked about recently with Malcolm and Marie is us looking sort of introspectively at ourselves, in regards to criticism.
Yeah,
I don't think either of us would call ourselves critics. We'd say we were reviewers. Because personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with critics who just share whether they enjoyed something, but or not. But the character of Tabitha here, the
yeah,
Broadway critic, she just wants to maliciously tear Regan down because she believes his
horrible,
play lacks
horrible.
integrity. It's like, what about deciding that you're going to destroy someone's career has integrity?
Yeah,
I feel like most critics wouldn't tear down someone's character the way she does, just the end product.
yeah.
I think, when it comes to us, we talk less about a film's quality, and, we more ask questions about what happened in it. And, the sort of
Yeah,
making sense of that kind of stuff. We're not like, this was bad about it, this was bad about it. I mean, maybe with WandaVision, let's be honest, but not with films in general,
yeah,
really.
exactly. Yeah, I bet you that sort of shit does happen in real life where critics just feel like they have to shit on a film. I just bet you that happens. Like it's
Yeah,
annoying. Like it's kind of ironic that they feel like in Tabitha's instance, she feels like she has to shit on Regan's play because it lacks integrity. But by the very essence of doing that, she's the one that lacks integrity. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So it's so ridiculous. Like it's such a juxtaposition there. It's so ironic. And yeah, it just
And
annoys
I
me
think,
that happens in real life. I bet you it
yeah,
does.
I think as often as that happens, people, credit, popular films as being good films.
Yeah,
I think a lot of popular cinema, from 30 to 50 years ago, a lot of it, just is not of the quality that, that the even, modern critics assert. I just think that, you know, people are scared of, what people will
definitely.
perceive as like a rogue opinion or a hot take.
Oh
I
yeah,
just
for
feel like
sure.
that, they're comfortable saying like Dora and the Lost City of Gold is a piece of shit, and this other thing's a
It's actually
masterpiece.
fantastic.
Yeah. I think they hit the easy targets that should be bad, and then
Yeah.
they don't really attack the great things,
Oh yeah, for
the
sure.
popular things. Because I mean,
Yeah.
we talked about Flora and Ulysses, and I watched, like, I had us watch that because I thought it would be terrible, not because I assumed we'd write a terrible review. I just thought the film would be terrible, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was a perfectly
Good. It was
serviceable
serviceable.
kids film,
Mhm.
and I think by anyone other than us that would have been sort of aggressively torn down because it's not the kind of film they want to watch.
Yeah, agreed. And one thing I wanted to ask you that I've been watching a lot of like football live streams when they kind of feel like when they're comparing a modern football team from this season to a team from the 90s, they kind of feel like they sort of question as to what era they'd be biased to. It kind of got me interested to ask you, like, do you think critics in general are more biased towards the older films, like the your Godfathers, your Taxi Drivers, those kind of films? Taxi Drivers is a bad example, but like the Godfathers and those kind of ones as compared to modern films? Because it's kind of interesting because I actually feel like I'd probably be more biased towards the older films. I feel like more pressure to like them. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I think that they uh, attach positivity to ones with the bigger legacy. I think ones that were famously popular are in the majority of the cases with
Mm,
modern reviews
yeah.
still popular. But I think when it comes to anything, that's an art form or skill based or something, you sort of stand on the shoulders of your predecessors. So I mean, when it comes to football teams, tactics, were all learned and advanced from how people used to play the game. So I mean, you can't
Yeah,
judge them by
definitely.
the same standards because modern teams have the intel and the knowledge of what works and what doesn't. I know
Definitely,
that
mate.
that's the same case.
Definitely.
I think that's the same case for the practicality of filmmaking, but not with the narrative of storytelling. So I think if you're criticizing the story of something, like, you know, people say, well, you can't complain about a film that came out 50 years ago because it's 50 years old. Why would you expect to like it? And I'm like, well, good films are good films. You know, I feel like
Era should be
that,
irrelevant then,
you know,
shouldn't it?
if a film looked like shit or sounded like shit because of the era, I would not criticize that. You know, I said that about Rocky, but that was really, you know, just in reference to the sound design, not the sound quality, because of course it's from the 70s. I don't have high expectations of that. But you
Yeah.
know, if I think good cinema is good cinema. You know,
Oh,
you know, if it's
definitely,
good,
mate.
that'll shine through. We loved, you know, The Godfather. Sorry, not The Godfather. Well, you liked it.
I
You
liked it.
know, you know, The Graduate. You know,
Taxi
Harold and
Driver.
Maude. You know, Taxi Driver. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the Citizen Kane. You know, there are a bunch of, you know, old and popular films that we really appreciated. But I just feel like people are afraid to, you know, criticize older films because of their legacy.
Definitely. Oh, 1,000,000%, mate. You took the words right out of my mouth there completely. Like, I think that doesn't, for me, it doesn't make those older films overrated. It just means that I think they're a lot more immune to criticism now, as if they were to come out today. I think nowadays, because there's such a variety of media where you can experience these films, people feel like they can criticize them a bit more, and that's fair enough. You know, I suppose from a quality wise, like the standards of audio production and stuff like that, and the way a shot should have improved. Yeah, of course, it's technology, but the way the story and the narrative's told, I don't think sort of should be overly criticized, because at the end of the day, there's no real technological advancements that can impact how you construct a narrative. For me, anyway, it's kind of a
Yeah,
similar thing to what you were saying. But yeah, I think Birdman's one of those films where it actually feels like a film in the 70s or 80s, but if it came out like 2014 or whenever it came out. So I think it's a really unusual one that feels sort of ahead of its time in a sense as well. Even though it came out very recently. But I mean, yeah, it's a marvelous film that, like I said, the greatest films make you have these discussions, don't they? So
yeah.
yeah,
You know, I think there's so many questions that have, you know, arisen here, and you know,
definitely, mate.
I just loved it. You know,
Oh
did
yeah,
you want to get into ratings?
yeah, go for it, mate. What'd you give it?
You know, I think it looks incredible. The acting is incredible. Some of the close-ups are a bit, you know, uncomfortably close.
Yeah, they were very
You
close,
know,
aren't they?
centimeters from their face. You know, just for the sake of the actors. But you know, I loved it. It's going to be another. I mean, I know you may not have as many nice things to say about the voices, but I think for me, this episode is going to be a clean sweep. I'm going to give this film a 10 out of
Yeah,
10.
mate, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. This is one of my favorite films of the last decade. It's incredible. The slate so far has been second to none. Really, it's been perfect. It's certainly been up there with some of the older sort of unconventional romances, those kind of films.
And then
But
you're like, and on to the voice.
under the voices, yeah, like I think this film is incredible. That Michael Keaton's amazing. Edward Norton, fantastic. I think Naomi Watts is also very good here.
Mhm.
And I'm just very impressed how it's shot. Like, I'm amazed like the actors didn't actually like bump into the camera or something, because it's that close. But yeah, it's a 10 out of 10, mate. Marvelous film. Marvelous film. So yeah, that wraps up our review of the Birdman, guys. The next one we're going to be talking about is The Voices, but it will have to be recorded on a different day because I'm a silly goose and I have work in about 50 minutes.
To be fair, I delayed us by 20 minutes.
No, you're okay, mate. It's my bad. I was the one who originally delayed. I pushed it till Saturday. But yeah, just to explain, that's why we look different, why we're in different clothes. So yeah, future Matthew and Callum, take it away with the Voices review. Okay.
So you'd previously likened the character of Jerry to Lenny from Of Mice and Men, and I think that is sort of a very good comparison. But one that I'd also say that is probably a project that we preferred to Of Mice and Men. We both enjoyed that, but a movie Lars and the Real Girl
Yes, I
with this
exactly the
character, you
same.
know, I think it is pretty much Lars if he was dangerous.
Yeah, agreed. I had the exact same. You know, especially the first 20 minutes of the film. It's such a similar tone to Lars and the Real Girl, and the film did blow me away in a sense when like I just wasn't expecting it to go down the road of like he's a serial killer, so to speak. Like, this guy is really dangerous, and that's where for me I'm not sure if it kind of works for me in a sense. Like, I definitely understand how like other people could definitely enjoy that kind of humor and that kind of narrative, but I don't know. For me, I kind of wanted him to be that sort of. I did maybe want it because I like Lars and the Real Girl so much for it to go down that avenue of like he just remains a sweet guy who, tries to, fall in love with Anna Kendrick or the other actress. I forget her name. Apologies. But yeah, I don't know. I think because it complicates things for me as to the likability of the character. Obviously, he's got severe mental mental issues. So he's obviously a sympathetic character with a tragic backstory, but it was a route that I definitely didn't expect it to go down at all, to be fair.
Do you think a lead character needs to be likable?
I think part of a lead character has to be a little bit, maybe not likable is the right word, but either likable, relatable, or just, just along those kind of lines where I like, obviously there's lead characters in films that are for the most part a lot really unlikable, but I think because Ryan Reynolds is such a charismatic actor, and every performance that I've seen of his, he is a likable character. It was maybe that's maybe not even a criticism of the film, it's just maybe in my head I'm just used to seeing him play these really fun characters and that are good characters for the most part. Whereas here he is kind of obviously he's tormented by his background and mental health issues, so I can't be too critical, but it's just an avenue I didn't expect the film to go down.
Yeah, it's a different, like I've seen this film probably 4 times at this point, and
Mhm.
it is a different character than I remember. In my mind, it was sort of this guy who was so ill that he couldn't like control his compulsion. But in reality, like it's more of a dynamic where the pets act as like the angel and the demon on his
Yeah, they do,
shoulders,
don't they?
and he actually actively chooses to listen to the head of Fiona and Mr. Whiskers. Whenever he makes the decision to kill Lisa in order to give Fiona a friend.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was also conflicted because it is Ryan Reynolds. I really wanted to like him, and it is
Of
this
course.
sort of sweet, innocent, gentle giant. At least for the sort of first third half of the film. Third or half. I'm not saying those maths don't work out.
I know what you mean. I
But yeah,
get you.
I
Yeah, yeah,
agree.
yeah.
I agree. He took an unlikable turn at that point. But
Yeah.
I am conflicted because he presents as so sweet, sad, and innocent, and
He
the
does. Yeah,
backstory
he
presented
does.
that
Yeah.
you mentioned is obviously tragic. And in private, he still maintains that persona, but he does seem to have a level of control over his actions. And I don't know that his illness in this manner absolves him because he makes the decision. Like
Yeah.
between Oscar the dog and Dr. Warren, like he has as many good influences as he does bad.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, like what you said rightly, buddy, is that he actively does try to listen to Mr. Whiskers and the voices inside his head. And I think from my perspective, the Anna Kendrick character really helps bring out that sort of innocence in him as well. Like that their sort of dynamic is very, very sweet. And I think just when he actually kills Anna Kendrick's character, even though that's not his first killing in the film, it kind of sort of said to me that Jerry he's a really dangerous individual. Like he doesn't really comprehend his own strength as well. In a sense, kind of similar to John Malkovich as Lenny in Of Mice and Men, like we were talking about. And yeah, I mean the character is quite scary as well because you don't know where he's going to turn to next. He's quite unstable in that sense. So I suppose I mean Ryan Reynolds, like we said, he's an incredible performance for sure.
Yeah, and Lisa's death, as you mentioned, like maybe the most tragic one I've ever seen. Like, and it's
Yeah, it
it's sort
is
of a
brutal.
testament to the film that it managed to make me feel that with like the gore, because
Hmm.
before he had sort of stabbed Fiona multiple times, and you see her guts hanging out, but here
Yeah.
you sort of just slowly see the life drain from Lisa's eyes, and it
He's
was
a
it was
it's
full on.
brutal. It was, no, it absolutely was. Mate, Anna Kendrick's great here. Really good.
And I remember I had something to say. I don't remember what it was.
Well,
Fuck.
one,
Oh
well,
yeah,
one,
you
yeah, you
know,
got it. You got it.
to go back to his sense of control, like he does. He's not an ill person who hasn't received help. He's going to therapy and he's given pills which he actively tosses down the sink. So I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I think one of the big points of the film for me is when he takes the pills and everything becomes normal. Like you see the true state of his apartment, and I think that's one of the sympathetic points of his character. Like he doesn't want to be lonely again. And I think through obviously taking the pills, everything just returns to normal. Like there are no voices. So by actively not taking the pills, he is kind of taking um he's taking responsibility for his actions there because he actively wants the voices inside his head again. It's almost as a I kind of likened it to some kind of like superpower, so sort of ability that he in his head he kind of thinks he has, like he's able to communicate with animals and these dead decapitated heads in his fridge. You know what I mean? It's quite unusual, but I think that's just part. I think part of it for me is maybe why I didn't really like it as much as you did is because it went down the avenue that I didn't want it or expect it to go. Not necessarily because it's a bad film. I think it's a very well made film that it's that starts off really good, and the ending I think for me obviously when he's in heaven, so to speak. I thought I actually would have respected the film a little more if it just if it just they showed him for what he is and just said, you know, this guy has severe mental health issues, you know, he is a very tragic backstory, this is how we're going to help him, and rather than just sort of play it off for gags towards the end, I thought it was obviously a very funny film, but I don't know, I would have preferred potentially to see him sort of get more help with his condition, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for the ending, you know, that is probably where we differ most, because, you know, when it comes to this sort of independent kind of film, I think, you know, in the last few decades, you know, a lot of them sort of struggle to stick the landing, and you know that is
Sure,
normally where you
sure.
know they really falter, I think, in quality. But I think that Jerry's death here means that he can't hurt anyone else,
It's a good point.
and he's also at peace. So I feel like it's sort of the
Yeah,
most
I get that.
comfortable
Yeah, I
middle
get that.
ground, you
Yeah.
know, where there's probably the most justice served. Because I mean, you know, you know, it's not like he isn't killed by police. You know, he makes the conscious decision to let himself die in the fire. So I mean, you know, it's his active choice. So I mean, you can't say that, you know, it was, you know, the police, you know, sort of killing him with excessive force, and it's also not, you know, that he
Yeah,
gets away with the murders. So I mean, I feel like, you know, where he's in a position where he's comfortable and he can't hurt anyone else, I felt like that was the,
it's a great
you know,
point.
sort of the only way for it to go down.
Yeah, I mean, you've raised a great point there, man, as well as to like, I think the whole theme of the film is actually like responsibility. Like you said, he takes responsibility for the actions by not deciding like he doesn't want to hurt anyone else. So he sort of tragically takes his own life by just, you know, letting himself get engulfed by the flames at the end. And, you know, I think that is the theme of the film. It is taking responsibility for your actions. And anyway, it is in a way, it's one of the darkest films out of the four that we've reviewed in this podcast. And I think it's the one that feels, for me anyway, it feels a little bit tonally inconsistent as to what it wants to be. It wants to be taken seriously, but also wants to play it for gags. But I definitely respect the film in terms of, you know, the narrative, and, you know, the performances are absolutely remarkable. You know, I think it's one of those films where I think in another year, or, you know, another decade or something, I think this film would have been incredibly popular. I'm actually baffled why it wouldn't be, because it's not a film that I hate. I think it's a decent film. But I think even like it's got big actors in it. It's got, I know that devastates you. It's got like
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds, Anna Kendrick. Like I'm amazed it didn't do well. You know what I mean? Like I think at least deserve that.
Yeah, you know, I think maybe first time around the sort of tonal inconsistency, you know, that doesn't play that great. But I think if you watched it again, you know, it
Yeah,
might come
on
across
a
more as,
rewatch,
you
yeah,
know,
definitely.
it's an intentional distinction, you know, because the separation of his life on pills and off pills is so, you know, visually and tonally, you know, separated from each other,
Sure,
that, you know,
sure.
maybe that's a choice. And you know, we on the episode where we talked about the Wilhelm scream, the history of that, you know, I asked you sort of what your favorite film trope was, and I asked you, but even I struggled to think of mine, and I think I've come up, I think
Oh
I've
yeah,
come to a decision,
go for it.
and it's in a scene that you mentioned previously. It's the idea of expectations versus reality, which we sort of first encountered in 500 Days of Summer. And you know, I think it is something similar that happens here. You know, the moment that you mentioned where Jerry sees, you know, the disgusting reality of his apartment, and you know, in turn, like the violence of his actions, like it was really harrowing. And
Yeah,
I think in a film like this, you need that, because you
yeah.
need to
Oh,
see, you know,
spot
you need
on.
to see
Yeah,
through their eyes, and then you need to see through the eyes of the other characters to understand, you know, sort of the problems that you're dealing with.
yeah, yeah. I think so, buddy. I think so. It really displays sort of the stark reality of his life. That, you know, he's just, his apartment just covered in blood. You know, it's got, you know, droppings all over the floor. You know, it's disgusting. But I think yeah, you're absolutely right. The expectations versus reality, that is a great trope of films. Obviously, you know, 500 Days of Summer, we mentioned it to death in that podcast with the romantic comedies part two. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to think of other instances where that is happening. You know, I think it's definitely a thing that does tend to happen in these films that deal with voices, or, you know, schizophrenia, those kind of things, especially, you know, films like Fight Club as well. You get to see the reality that, you know, Tyler Durden is actually the narrator, so it kind of presents it there with, you know, mini flashbacks where, you know, it's Edward Norton's character instead of Brad Pitt. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, mate. It's a great trope, and I actually wish it was used more. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, buddy, I'd only seen this film once, and I'm aware that, you know, the bathroom company that Jerry works for, it's all very like stylish pink. The fork trucks are pink. The jumpsuits
Yeah.
and stuff are pink. Does it ever show a reality where they're all just boring colors? Because I thought that was where it was going to go, as to like, oh,
No,
Jerry
I was
thinks it's all vibrant and colorful, but it's actually just mundane and boring.
yeah. This is the first time on a watch of this that's occurred to me because I suppose I haven't seen this in a few years, so I suppose I wasn't really looking out in a particular detail oriented way.
Sure. Yeah.
I know that there's never a scene where you see that, and I probably only like twigged that near the very end where I was like, well, if his apartment's a shithole, this whole city seems to be a shithole. Surely the
Yeah.
company that he works for must be. But there's never a scene that shows that, and I think that is maybe something that was missing. I would have liked to see that.
Yeah, for sure, mate, for sure. I think it's probably potentially they were alluding to that. I don't know, but yeah, I mean that wraps up my remarks on the voices, buddy. Anything from yourself?
That's everything from me as well.
Well, I'd love to hear your rating for this, mate. Because of course, I respect your opinion, of course, and I'm really interested.
I don't
to see.
respect yours, but okay.
I respect the honesty. No, I'm joking. What would you give it, mate? What would you give it?
Well, I think it's probably going to be no question here. It's probably amongst my top 10 favorite films of all time. So of course it has to be a 10. I can't really find any fault with it.
Love
I
it.
think, I'm not questioning your judgment on this, but I think if I can force you to watch it a second time in a few years, you may appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I'm just trying to think. It's obviously been a little bit of time since between the other 3 films that we reviewed. Is this a clean slate of 40 out of 40 for you?
This is another clean sweep. I think probably only
Happy
the
days.
second since Unconventional Romance.
Yeah, no, it was a great slate of episodes as well. I think for me, I'm gonna have to let the team down and give this one a 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. I think the performance is amazing. I love that sort of stark reality between the expectations in Jerry's head and the actual reality of his issues. I think it feels a little bit totally inconsistent for me on the first watch, but of course, on a second rewatch, I think it definitely will feel differently after some of the great points you've mentioned. So yeah, I think it's a very serviceable film for me, and it's actually got a lot of sweet performances in there as well. Like that's probably one of the strengths of it. But I mean, this
is there a movie? Can I ask?
Yeah,
Is there a movie that that you've genuinely loved and it means a lot to you that I've hated?
I don't know, man. I think when I think of like movies that I love, I think you also equally either really enjoy them or love them as well. Like 500 Days of Summer, I think you really like. American Beauty, I think you really liked as well. I think for them, yeah, I think we're pretty much in agreement. I'm trying to think of any ones where I've disagreed with you. I think this might be one of the few ones where it's one of your favorites that I've disagreed
I'd
with.
like to see us do like a top 10 video where we just
for
either
sure. Yeah.
praise or shit on each other's ideas.
Yeah, because I think my top 10 is potentially changed a little bit recently. Like I'm a few, like about a year ago, it was filled with a couple superhero films, but since we've watched a lot more films on the channel, it's sort of been sort of filled up with a lot more sort of character study films, like The Taxi Drivers, like The American Beauty. So it'll be fun to actually do like a top 10 movies podcast, yeah, for sure. But I mean, this has been a really good batch of films this week. It's been up there with Unconventional Romances. So yeah, it was great recording with you. I suppose because it's a podcast, we usually do a little bit of future episode chat as well on the channel. So what were you thinking recording in the next podcast?
Well, I haven't really discussed this with you.
Yeah,
but
we're sort of riffing it here.
There's a couple of new releases coming out. Tom and Jerry has just debuted on HBO Max, and of course we watched that through perfectly legitimate means.
Of course,
100%. Of
we
course,
always do.
So if we get around to watching that came out sometime last week, so we can maybe watch that for sometime this week. And then there's also a lot of movies that we missed. Last year. I think we weren't recording as much. We had sort of interruptions with pandemic and then us starting university. So I think we didn't really get to talk about that many new releases. Of course, there weren't that many. Within 2020, that weren't on streaming. We only talked about two that came into the cinema: Birds of Prey and Sonic. So I thought what might be a good idea is if I cataloged some of the big, at least the big like awards contender films that we missed from last year and from this year, and then we could do them in a podcast episode of themselves. So it was the Golden Globes recently, and there were a lot of ones from 2020 and then from early 2021 that were up for grabs for some big awards. So that there was a lineup of 3 that I thought we could do for a 2020 edition that I thought I could pitch to you.
Of course, go
So
for it.
there's Emma, which is the Anya Taylor-Joy adaptation of the novel. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I've heard about that one, mate. Yes, I've heard about that one.
And then there was Trial of the Chicago 7, which was the Aaron Sorkin directed one on Netflix. And then there was also what is that? It just came into my head.
It wasn't like Big or something, was it?
It was God no. I mean, we may get to that eventually, but like I'm not going to put you through that. Unless it's in demand. The other one was One Night in Miami, which is the one about all the Black historical figures that sort of came together for a discussion. I don't know too much about it, but I know it has like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. I think cool. I don't know too much about it, but I thought it seemed like an important film, and it was up for a lot of awards.
For sure, yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, that sounds great, buddy. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, well, I mean, thanks very much for today, buddy. Appreciate that. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. This will be in our Movie Mates podcast playlist as well, where you can check out our other themed episodes too. And yeah, hope you guys are all well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well too. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.